You know, the NFL had the chance to do the right thing. I believe that the NFL was going to be on the right side of history for the first time ever. Fortunately, the NFL did what the NFL does. The impact that they've had on Toronto FC, it's undeniable. I understand that you have to defend your quarterback. I understand that you just can't come out and, say, well, we don't want this Sean anyways. I understand. I get it. I have to do this because I have to appreciate it. And we are back. What's going on, everybody? This is Ray Rout of Ray Sports Rant. And it is August the 30th, 2022. And Ray Sports Rant is a part of the Dean Blundell Network over at deanblundell.com for now. And I just got done and over with recording episode 12 of the daily Ray Sports Rant podcast. And I talked about the Toronto Blue Jays, how they scored, that huge extra inning win against the Chicago Cubs on Monday night. And Danny Jansen was the hero of the game. I wanted to talk a little bit about I did talk about the impact that Richie Laryea has on Toronto FC since coming back in 5 games. Want to talk about why do people hate great athletes and which quarterback is going to be affected by their favorite targets going away. Is it going to be Brady, who lost Gronk, Patrick Mahomes, who lost Tyreek Hill, or Aaron Rodgers, who lost Devontae Adams, plus another little surprise for you. If you want to listen to the Ray Sports Rant podcast, download it. I left the link in the description. Both of the YouTube video and of the Twitter account. So hope you guys, are happy with all of that. But this is a little tease, because one thing I did talk about in my podcast tonight was sports fans spend too much time in the past, way too much time in the past. And I'm going to talk about it again, just for my YouTube crew and the guys over watching me, or the people watching me on Twitter at Dean Blundell Net. Because, part of the Dean Blundell Podcast Network. I did a radio spot today on on the Locker Room with Lachlan Cross and the boys on 95.7 Free Cruise FM. And they introduced me as the director of sports with the Dean Blundell Podcast Network. And of course, you can always see my other podcast, the Who's Got Next podcast, which is every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. live on YouTube, live on the Dean Blundell Network social media pages, as well as you can download the audio podcast. Who's Got Next? It's me, Mario, Connor, Mike. We have a good time. But so here's a little tease for what you can expect in tonight's podcast of the Ray Sports Rant. And again, so I put out a post yesterday. I also talked about it on episode 11 of Ray Sports Rant. I talked about the greatest Blue Jay moments of all time. And what I was getting at is how subjective those conversations are. Anywho, I wrote a piece about it. I said, what's the greatest moment? I talked about my greatest moment, which actually came like April 13th, 2007. It was a Doc Holliday moment. And people, started, responding to the tweet after Dean sent it out today and talking about it. Well, it's a Joe Carter home run, obviously. Was it, though? Was it the Joe Carter home run? Maybe for you. Dean talked about it being 19 years old and drunk out of his mind, and it was just phenomenal. I was 8 years old and in bed. There are people who are 30-year-old adults who were not alive when Joe Carter hit the home run and touched them all when he hit the biggest home run of his life. So you know what? The 93 moment, I understand the significance of it, but it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. The same way that the Paul Henderson goal means nothing to me. Gretzky to Lemieux means nothing to me. I think I was 1 during that Canada Cup. I wasn't born during the Summit Series. And those are things, but we live in the past. And I saw a really good tweet. I was just joking around with everybody. I was calling all the old guys arguing with me about the Carter home run. I was calling them boomers, and I was trolling today. I was in one of my finer trolling moods. And then I tweeted something out, and I basically said, I'm gonna actually try to find the tweet here because it made a shit ton of success or a shit ton of sense. Not what I tweeted, but what somebody else tweeted at me. But I wrote, so somebody said something. I'm like, what if you're 30 years old and you weren't born when Joe Carter hit the home run? Does that mean anything to them? Like, just saying, Paul Henderson's goal has zero impact on my life. I wasn't born. And this dude McGregor said, I agree with your point. In sports discussion all time, and quote, that I saw too often means the same thing. And it's true because it's what means something to you. And it's the same way when I was explaining my whole Doc Halladay moment on the podcast yesterday. I was like, that was such a big moment for me watching Doc Halladay pitch 10 innings in a game that meant nothing at the end of the day. It meant nothing. So I was having a little bit of fun with the old guys. But, you know, I think that at times we spend so much time talking about the moments we seen, the players that we seen, and arguing about where they land on the all-time list. One of the most common arguments among sports fans, LeBron versus Michael Jordan. And what you get is a lot of teenagers and guys in their early 20s that are argue with you that LeBron James the greatest player of all time. Even guys in their 30s will make that argument with you. And once I was arguing with this 20-something, I was like, dude, I'm like, have you ever watched Michael Jordan play? And his response was no. And I was like, oh, damn. Okay. You also got to remember, especially in Canada, what I represent while I wear my German jersey. When we talk about Canada, we got to remember that basketball wasn't a big deal back in the Jordan day here. I mean, you had basketball fans, but we didn't have like all the games that were on TV. The following wasn't as large. Vince Carter is really what made basketball popular in Toronto, at least. It was all about the Maple Leafs when I was a kid, back when I used to watch the ice game. But I did see Michael Jordan play. I was very well aware of Michael Jordan. I grew up in the Michael Jordan area. I'm like Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, like that was my time. So when I think of my fond memories of basketball players, it's those guys. It's the same way when we get into these arguments, like all-time Raptors. I'm one of the guys who argue it's Kyle Lowry is an all-time Raptor, the all-time Raptor. I believe that Kyle Lowry just showed a commitment to this city that no other quote-unquote star had. But how much of that is because I'm a prisoner of the moment? Right? Because maybe I'm just totally wrong. Maybe it's Vince Carter. It's not T-Mac. Could it be JYD? Could it be Antonio Davis? Is it Kawhi Leonard because he's the one who finally brought a championship to the city? Is it DeMar DeRozan who wasn't with the Raptors when they won their championship, but is it him because of the loyalty he showed to Toronto, even though we didn't show the loyalty back when Masai sent them packing? Right? It's all those things. Greatest least moments of all time. Sundin's goal against Ottawa in overtime. I remember that clearly. I remember where I was. It was, I think, Easter weekend. I had family over. It was huge. You know, I loved Patrick Waugh growing up, but I don't remember the 1993 Stanley Cup championship. My more fondest memory of Patrick Waugh was when he won the cup with the Colorado Avalanche, and I think 96 or 97. You know, I remember Joe Sakic when he handed the cup to Bork. That's one of my favorite Stanley Cup moments. I remember Daniel Alfredson shooting the puck at Scott Niedermayer. Because that's the era that I grew up in. That's when I was really big into sports. The Batista home run, the bat flip, that inning, was it the seventh inning? The craziest seventh inning in the history of baseball? That's what is in my head constantly. Not the 1992-1993 team. The first ball game I ever went to, I think, was in 93. Sat in the nosebleeds, got them for my birthday. They played Milwaukee. They lost. I think David Cohn was on the mound. You know, my first real era of Blue Jays baseball where like I knew who the players were. I knew who John Olerud, Joe Carter, Robbie Alomar, and Devon White. I knew all those guys. I remember being at a cottage for the weekend and watching the ball game on TV and Devon White scaling the walls and making a catch at the wall. It was phenomenal. I was like 8 or 9. But when I think about like my teenhood and going into my early 20s, like when I was really, really like when I became like the stupid sport junkie that I became today, it was like Vernon Wells, Alex Rios, Doc Holliday, AJ Burnett. I remember that team, man. Brought in, what is it, BJ, the closer? I forget his last name. So you had Wells, Aaron Hill at second base, right? That's kind of the era I grew up in. It's like the New England Patriots. Everybody knows I'm a Patriots fan. I'm trying to live this new era of Patriots football with Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne at the helm and not Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman. And I became a Patriots fan back in the early 2000s, or sorry, the late 90s, but it's the early 2000s championship team I want to talk about, right? My favorite players, Willie McGinnis, Teddy Bruschi. I talk to guys now who they weren't even alive, or they were like 3 years old when those guys won championships. So they're not on the all-time Patriots list, even though they 100% deserve to be. But then, I'm not here arguing for Babe Perella. I don't hear people making big arguments for Dave Stieb. Probably one of the best pitchers ever pitched for Toronto. I met Dwayne Hankey. Pat Hankey, and Dwayne Ward a few years ago at a sports card show. Nicest guys ever met. Huge, gigantic guys. Like, I'm 6 foot, 6'1", 270. And these guys were taller than me and bigger than me. Just gigantic human beings. Nicest guys I ever met. I know I'm on the video version. I wish I would have pulled the picture. I would have shared it. Maybe I'll share it on a different show. But I have no vivid memory of them pitching ever. Like ever. I don't know. I think we live in the past too often that we don't recognize that people younger than us will have different memories. 20-year-olds remember Kawhi Leonard. They don't remember Vince Carter and what Vince Carter did for this city. They might know about it. I understand. I know the significance of the Carter home run. The same way that these 20-year-old Raptors fans will know the significance of what Vince Carter did for basketball in Toronto, but they're going to be a Kawhi guy. They're going to be a Siakam. They're going to love Scotty Barnes. The moments are going to be stuck because it's what you see. Because if you're telling me the greatest moment ever has to be related to a championship, then Leafs fans got to be talking about, was it Papin who scored in 1967? Made it 2-1 against Montreal? Right? You shouldn't be talking about great moments in hockey if it's past 67 if you're a Leaf fan. But you do, because it's what you witnessed and what you've seen. So, that's it. Anyways, it was a little bit of a different, I do talk about this on the podcast, a little bit of a different take, but I talk about all that other stuff too. So why don't you click the link if you're on YouTube, in the description, if you're on Twitter, in the description, and head on over to I left on Twitter, it's the Spotify connection, but on our, I know it's the RayRoute.com. I'll just put the RayRoute.com link for everybody, and then you can download wherever you get your downloads, because we're on Apple Podcasts now. It's a big day for us. We've been trying to get on and get bigger distribution. We're on Google Podcasts. We're kind of everywhere. So now we can up everything. Oh, but that's it. I guess it's time to hit my music. All right, we have dancing up here. Thank you for tuning into the video version of the Rays Sports Rant podcast. Rays Sports Rant. This wasn't the podcast. The podcast is different. I want everybody to get just different flavors of what I do. You can always find the micro content over on my YouTube page too, Rays Sports Rant, also on the Who's Got Next YouTube channel. And that's all I gotta say for now. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are doing good. And just, I don't know. I guess don't forget, you're all legit, kid.